There was a decade when you actually waited for a song. You waited for the DJ to play it. You waited for it at the record store. You sat with it, alone, and figured out what it meant to you. These are 13 songs from the 1970s kids today will never understand. Song number 13, American Pie, by Don McLean, 1971. I started singing, bye, bye, Miss American Pie. Don McLean was a 13-year-old paperboy in New Rochelle, New York, when he cut the twine on a bundle of newspapers one February morning in 1959 and read the headline about a plane crash in Iowa. Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and J.P. Richardson, the Big Bopper, were gone. Something in McLean never fully moved past it. He spent the next decade carrying that grief, watching everything pile on top of it. The assassinations, Vietnam, the riots, the slow unraveling of every hopeful thing the post-war years had promised. When he finally sat down in Cold Spring in Philadelphia and wrote it all out, what came out was 8.5 minutes long. We started singing, bye, bye, Miss American Pie. American Pie was recorded in May and June of 1971 at the record plant in New York City. Because it ran 8 minutes and 42 seconds, nearly the length of 2 full sides of a 45 revolutions per minute single, the original release split it across both sides of the disc. Radio stations were told it would never get airplay at that length. McLean insisted they play the whole thing. They did. The song hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on January 15, 1972, and held that spot for 4 weeks. At the time, it was the longest song ever to reach number 1, a record it held for nearly 50 years, until Taylor Swift's 10-minute version of All Too Well broke it in 2021. Swift sent McLean a bouquet of flowers afterward. Bye, bye, Miss American Pie. The figures and events in the song were debated for decades. McLean mostly refused to explain them. When he released his original handwritten notes at auction in April 2015, he confirmed a few things. The marching band that refused to yield referred to the military-industrial complex. The sweet perfume was tear gas. He released the notes and still left most of the rest open. The players tried for a forward pass with a gesture. What he said consistently was what the song was really about, an America coming apart at the seams. He wasn't only mourning 3 musicians from 1959. He was mourning the world that had existed around them, and the world that had been promised afterward, and the long, painful distance between the two. I started singing, bye, bye, Miss American Pie. Song number 12, Bohemian Rhapsody, by Queen, 1975. Before it had a name, Freddie Mercury called it the Cowboy Song. He had been carrying fragments of it since the late 1960s, when he was a student at Ealing Art College in London, pieces of piano that didn't fit any existing structure, an opening idea he couldn't place anywhere. He kept them in his head for years. By 1975, he had the whole thing worked out before Queen ever set foot in a studio. Recording began on August 24, 1975, at Rockfield Studio 1 in Monmouth, Wales, and spread across multiple facilities over 3 weeks. Brian May said the song was all in Freddie's mind before they started. Mercury arrived knowing exactly what every section required. The operatic middle section took a week on its own. Mercury, May, and Roger Taylor sang their vocal parts for 10 to 12 hours a day. The result was 180 separate overdubs layered onto the track. By the time the tape had been run through the equipment enough times to accommodate them, producer Roy Thomas Baker noted that if you held it up to a light source, you could see straight through it. The magnetic coating had nearly worn away from repeated use. The song ran 5 minutes and 55 seconds. EMI wanted to release something shorter. Queen refused. A DJ named Kenny Everett changed everything. Mercury slipped him an unreleased copy of the tape, and Everett played it on Capital Radio in London, then played it again and again. He played it 14 times over a single weekend in October 1975, with listeners calling in to request it between each play. By Monday morning, record shops were fielding requests for a song that wasn't officially released yet. EMI released it on October 31st, 1975. It spent 9 consecutive weeks at number 1 in the UK. In the United States, it reached number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100 on its initial release. No Grammy nomination came. The Recording Academy gave nominations in the relevant category that year to Chicago and the Starland Vocal Band. The song has sat at the top of nearly every greatest songs poll taken since. Song number 11, Hotel California, by Eagles, 1977. Don Felder wrote the guitar arrangement for Hotel California while sitting in the living room of a rented beach house in Malibu, playing an acoustic 12-string guitar on a sunny July afternoon. He caught what he had on a 4-track recorder in a back bedroom before the progression could slip away. He passed the tape to the rest of the band. Don Henley wrote most of the lyrics. What came back was the opening arpeggio that half the world now recognizes after 2 notes, and a set of images, a dark desert highway, a place you can check into but never leave, that the band has spent decades declining to explain completely. Henley described the song as the Eagles' interpretation of the seductive and ultimately hollow nature of the California dream. Specifically, the version of it the music industry had built around them in those years. The hotel was never a real place. People spent years looking for a building on the Sunset Strip that matched the description. There wasn't one. The outro guitar solo was played by Felder and Joe Walsh trading phrases for roughly 2 minutes. They built the outro through overdubs, layering their parts separately. And when they reached the studio session to record it, Felder realized he couldn't remember exactly what he'd played on the original demo a year earlier. They had to call his housekeeper back in Malibu and have her hold a cassette player up to the phone so Felder could relearn his own part. Hotel California was released as a single in February 1977. It won the Grammy Award for Record of the Year in 1978. The album sold more than 26 million copies worldwide. Song number 10, Superstition, by Stevie Wonder, 1972. The drum beat came from Jeff Beck. Beck and Wonder had been introduced in 1972 through producers Malcolm Cecil and Robert Margouleff during sessions for what would become Talking Book. Beck was going to contribute guitar on one of Wonder's tracks, and in return, Wonder was going to write Beck a song, intended to appear on Beck's next record with his power trio, Beck, Bogert, and Appice. During a session in New York, Beck sat down at the drum kit and started playing. Wonder asked him to keep going. Beck later recalled exactly what happened next. Then the lick came out, Superstition. I thought, he's given me the riff of the century. The understanding was that Beck would record it first. Then Motown intervened. Berry Gordy heard what Wonder was developing and decided it should be the lead single from Talking Book. Wonder told the label he had written it for Beck. Gordy said it didn't matter. Wonder recorded his own version, playing drums, clavinet, and synthesizer bass himself. On the finished track, he played the signature Hohner clavinet riff and laid every major instrumental part. The song was released on October 24, 1972. Before Beck's version could be completed, Beck released his version in 1973. It received far less attention. Wonder's version reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1973. It won the Grammy for Best Rhythm and Blues Song. Song number 9, What's Going On, by Marvin Gaye, 1971. The song was originally written by Ronaldo Obi Benson of the Four Tops. On May 15, 1969, the band's tour bus stopped in San Francisco. At People's Park in Berkeley, Benson witnessed police using force against anti-war protesters, young people being beaten in the street, while other young people were being sent to fight in Vietnam. He started writing from that image, brought in songwriter Al Cleveland, and took the finished draft to his bandmates in the Four Tops. They wanted nothing to do with it. Too political. He took it to Marvin Gaye. Gaye had been exchanging letters with his younger brother Frankie, who had come back from Vietnam changed. He rewrote Benson's draft substantially, deepening the personal register of what had started as a protest song. Benson later said that Gaye tailored the hell out of it. When Gaye presented the recording to Berry Gordy, Gordy called it the worst thing I've ever heard in my life and refused to release it. Gaye went on a recording strike, no new material, until the song came out. Eventually, Motown sales vice president Barney Alls pressed 100,000 copies and released the single on January 21, 1971, without Gordy's knowledge. It sold 200,000 copies in its first week and became Motown's fastest-selling single at the time. Song number 8, Imagine, by John Lennon, 1971. Imagine all the people. The recording of Imagine took place on May 27, 1971, at Ascot Sound Studios, a home studio Lennon had built at Tittenhurst Park, his estate in Berkshire, England. The sessions were filmed in their entirety. The footage of Lennon at the white grand piano in the all-white room became one of the defining images of the decade. The conceptual foundation of the song came from Yoko Ono's 1964 artist's book Grapefruit, a collection of instructional poems asking the reader to imagine various things. Lennon drew directly from that framework. He did not give Ono a songwriting credit when the record was released. In 1980, in one of his final interviews, a conversation with David Sheff for Playboy magazine, published after Lennon was killed, he addressed it. A lot of it, the lyric and the concept, came from Yoko. But in those days I was a bit more selfish, a bit more macho, and I sort of omitted her contribution. Ono received a formal co-writing credit in 2017. Imagine was released as a single in the United States in October 1971, where it peaked at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was not released as a single in the UK until 1975, after Lennon was shot and killed in New York City on December 8, 1980. The song returned to the top of charts worldwide. The basic recording, voice and piano, was completed in a single day. Song number 7, Go Your Own Way, by Fleetwood Mac, 1977. By the time Fleetwood Mac went into the studio to record Rumors in 1976, both couples in the band had collapsed. Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks had ended their relationship. Christine and John McVie had separated after 8 years of marriage. Everyone still had to show up for work. Buckingham wrote, Go Your Own Way, at a rented house during a break from touring. He has described writing it as stream of consciousness, working through, in real time, the specific pain of watching someone he loved decide to leave. The song included a line that accused Nicks of moving immediately from one relationship to another after their split. Nicks disputed it. She said it was false, and she asked Buckingham to remove it before the record came out. He declined. She sang backing vocals on the finished recording. Then she sang it live on the Rumors tour. Night after night, she stood a few feet from the man who had written it about her. She later said, Every time those words would come on stage, I wanted to go over and kill him. He knew it, so he really pushed my buttons through that. Buckingham's response was consistent. It was how he experienced it. That's what songs were for. Song number 6, Le Freak, by Chic, 1978. On New Year's Eve, 1977, Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards of Chic were invited to Studio 54 in New York City by Grace Jones, who wanted to meet about them producing her next album. When they arrived at the door, the staff had not been told to expect them. They were turned away twice. Their music was playing inside. Rodgers lived around the corner from the club. They went back to his apartment, drank 2 bottles of champagne, and started writing from their frustration. The original refrain was directed at the doorman, with clarity. After trying "freak off" as a substitute for the uncensorable phrase, they landed on "freak out." That was the version Atlantic Records received. When Rogers and Edwards presented the finished recording, the label executives left the conference room before the song was over and asked if Chic had anything better. Chic pushed for the song anyway. Le Freak was released on September 21, 1978. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in December 1978 and held that position for 6 weeks. The first single in Atlantic Records history to reach number 1 3 separate times, displaced twice by other records and climbing back each time. It became the best-selling single in Atlantic Records history. Song number 5, Stayin Alive by Bee Gees, 1977. The Bee Gees wrote the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack while living in France at a studio called Château d'Hérouville outside Paris. The recording of Stayin Alive was finished at Criteria Studios in Miami. The drum track on the record is a loop. Drummer Dennis Bryan had to leave the sessions when his mother died. Unable to find a replacement in time, the band and producers Albie Galutin and Carl Richardson built the track around 2 bars of drums borrowed from another song they had been working on, Night Fever. By the time Bryan returned, the loop felt so right that they kept it. The tempo was set at approximately 103 beats per minute. Decades later, researchers at the University of Illinois College of Medicine found that 103 beats per minute sits almost exactly at the rate recommended for CPR chest compressions, 100 to 120 per minute. The American Heart Association began using the song in public CPR training campaigns. The British Heart Foundation ran its own campaign in 2012 featuring actor Vinnie Jones demonstrating compressions to the track. Song number 4, I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor, 1978. I Will Survive was the B-side. Polydor Records had hired producer Freddie Perrin to record a cover of a song called Substitute for Gloria Gaynor. As part of the arrangement, Perrin and his co-writer Dino Fikaris were allowed to put one of their own compositions on the flip side. They had been holding on to a song they'd written sometime earlier, looking for the right singer. They offered it to Gaynor. The president of Polydor was enthusiastic about Substitute. He was not enthusiastic about the B-side. Substitute was released as the A-side in October 1978. Club DJs in New York, including Richie Kazor at Studio 54, started playing the flip side. Gaynor had personally brought copies to clubs and watched the response firsthand. The audience at Studio 54 reacted immediately. She handed Kazor a stack of singles to pass along to other DJs. The song spread through the clubs of New York and then out to radio. By December, I Will Survive had entered the Billboard Hot 100. In March 1979, it reached number 1. Song number 3, Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel, 1970. Paul Simon wrote Bridge Over Troubled Water for Art Garfunkel to sing. He handed it to Garfunkel and then spent years saying he should have kept it for himself. Simon wrote the song in 1969, drawing on a phrase from a recording by the Swan Silvertones, a gospel group, an offer from one person to another to hold them up when they couldn't hold themselves. The piano arrangement that defines the recording was played by session musician Larry Knechtel. Garfunkel sang it in 2 takes. He didn't reach for the notes in a way that called attention to the reaching. He just arrived at them. The restraint in the performance is the whole thing.
All your dreams are on their way.
Bridge Over Troubled Water was released in January 1970 and went to number 1 immediately. It held that position for 6 weeks in the United States. It won 6 Grammy Awards, including Record of the Year, Song of the Year, and Album of the Year. It was the best-selling single worldwide in 1970. Simon and Garfunkel split up later that year. The tension during the album sessions had been significant, and Simon later acknowledged feeling that the song's success, which he credited largely to Garfunkel's vocal, had complicated things between them. He had written the song and watched someone else become the one people associated with it. Song number 2, Dancing Queen, by ABBA, 1976. ABBA gave the first live domestic performance of Dancing Queen on Swedish television on June 18, 1976, the night before King Carl XVI Gustaf of Sweden married Sylvia Sommerlath. The song had already appeared on German and Japanese television earlier that spring, but the June 18th gala at the Royal Swedish Opera in Stockholm broadcast across Sweden the evening before the royal wedding was the moment it landed at home. The song had been in development since late 1975. Benny Andersson had been building around a particular chord sequence and piano introduction he couldn't set aside. Björn Ulvaeus and their manager Stig Andersson wrote the lyrics. The recording was completed at Metronome Studios in Stockholm. Dancing Queen was released as a single in August 1976. It reached number 1 across much of the world, including both the United States and the United Kingdom. In the UK, it was ABBA's only number 1 hit. In the United States, it was also their only chart topper. Remarkable, given that they were selling tens of millions of records worldwide across an entire decade. The song has never entirely gone away. It reappeared on charts multiple times, across multiple decades, and in multiple countries. It became the centerpiece of the stage musical Mamma Mia in 1999, and both film adaptations that followed. It has been played at weddings and sporting events and parties in practically every country on Earth. Song number 1, Stairway to Heaven, by Led Zeppelin, 1971. Stairway to Heaven was never released as a single. Not in 1971, not during the entire original run of the band. It appeared on Led Zeppelin 4, the album with no title on the cover, just 4 symbols. And that's where it lived. You had to own the record. Jimmy Page had been working on the guitar arrangement for months before the song was finished. The band had rented Headley Grange, a former poorhouse in Hampshire, England, as a rehearsal and writing space. Robert Plant wrote most of the lyrics during a single evening, sitting by a fireplace while Page played through the chord changes. He later said the words seemed to arrive rather than be composed, that he filled the notepad as if something else were driving the pen. The song runs 8 minutes and 2 seconds. It begins with a finger-picked acoustic guitar and ends with one of the most recognizable electric guitar solos in rock history. In between, the arrangement shifts 3 separate times, the tempo changes, and the emotional register moves from contemplative to urgent to transcendent in a way that takes 8 minutes and somehow doesn't feel like it. The track, Stairway to Heaven, was never released as a single, yet it became the most requested and most played song on American rock radio in the 1970s. FM radio had spent those years building an audience with patience. Album-oriented rock stations programmed their shows on the assumption that listeners had time and willingness to sit with something long. Stairway to Heaven was the format's greatest beneficiary. It built for 8 minutes, and every second of the build-up paid off. No single release, no Grammy. Just a track on an untitled album that became, in quiet stages, absolutely inescapable. Not because a label pushed it, but because people kept playing it. That's the difference. That was the decade. Every one of these songs came out of a time when music meant sitting with something. A record you saved up to buy. A song you waited for on the radio. A moment you couldn't replay whenever you wanted it. The artists on this list made records that have outlasted the decade they came from by half a century. And the people who heard them for the first time carry them a particular way. If this brought back something you hadn't thought about in a while, hit the like button. It helps the channel more than most people realize. And if you want more deep dives into the music that shaped the decades, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.